A pleasant good afternoon to all, and I wish to thank you for your patience. My name is Candace Saxon. I'm the Manager of Marketing and Communications here at NIHERST, and it is my esteemed pleasure to welcome you to today's webinar on learning loss. This session is a collaborative initiative between NIHERST and the Women's Roundtable Action Platform of Trinidad and Tobago, WRAPTT. NIHERST, whose mission is to stimulate sustainable national capability and capacity in science, technology, innovation, and technopreneurship through insightful research and relevant programs, has partnered with WRAPTT on this webinar with the goal of generating real conversations on key societal pain points, aptly tackling misinformation, and providing practical resources that will allow participants to take the next steps towards thriving in our post-COVID world. Many of us here today may be unfamiliar with the term learning loss. As such, it is our intent that at the end of today's session, you will be appropriately informed from three key perspectives: the student, the professional, and the parent. We look forward to healthy discourse and providing you with the necessary tools to thrive. At this juncture, I now wish to introduce to you the president of NIHERST to provide special greetings on behalf of the Institute.
Chair of WRAPTT, Hazel McLean, members of WRAPTT, distinguished panelists, management and staff members of NIHERST, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. On behalf of the National Institute of Higher Education, Research, Science and Technology, it is with great honor that I welcome you all to Real Talk Buzz COVID-19 Learning Loss, a webinar designed to address critical issues brought on by the impact of the ongoing global health crisis. Without consuming much of the agenda, allow me to express my sincerest gratitude for those engineers behind the implementation and execution of such a well-needed event. Your efforts towards its polished delivery is one that warrants applause from all present today. To those in attendance, know that your presence is one that is greatly appreciated as it signals your dedication to self-development and your intention to advance those in your care. The impact of COVID-19 was one that inflicted dramatic loss worldwide, with effects still being experienced today, more than 2 years after its pandemic status. These inflictions showed no bias, as it disrupted the usual process of world economies, national education systems, private and public sector operations, and much more. Though COVID-19 dominance in the public domain has dwindled somewhat when compared to some months prior, there is still a need to place emphasis on the concerns birthed out of its effects. In response, agencies such as NIHERST and its collaborative partner Women's Roundtable Action Platform of Trinidad and Tobago, WRAPTT, have accepted the responsibility to shed light on these points of interest. One such point of interest most evident is the learning losses experienced within the local and international education framework. Such interruptions in the formal education system is one that has not only affected the child, but the parent as well. As a result, there's a pressing need to ensure that the entire student population is functioning at a level where they can benefit from their fullest potential. Without taking the spotlight away from the aforementioned, ample attention must also be given to the effects of the pandemic on existing and up-and-coming professionals. The Institute is mindful that though some were able to adjust to the drastic changes brought on by the health crisis, others were not so fortunate. Within the space of 2 years, we witnessed the harsh reality of delayed professional growth, which has negatively impacted global sustainability goals. With no promise of a quick fix, it is our aim to produce an environment where healthy discourse can take place, not only to suggest possible solutions, but to follow through with its effective and efficient application as well. We are indeed aware of some of the challenges that may lie ahead, and are willing to accept such responsibility. As I make way for the rest of today's proceedings, I am reminded that the persons affected by the pandemic's impact are not only our family and friends, but also our countrymen. As such, we must remain committed to enabling a brighter future for all. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Lord-Lewis, for your introductory remarks. Our first panel for today will focus on learning loss and the college student, and will be fittingly moderated by Ms. Unique Williams. Ms. Williams is a licensed social worker currently servicing New York, Washington, D.C., Maryland, and Virginia. She's a doctoral student in the School of Social Work, Howard University, Washington, D.C., and as a clinician and social worker, Unique has worked in the K-12 educational settings, foster care placement, veteran services, and the hospital. Quite accomplished, Ms. Williams is. We welcome Ms. Unique Williams to the virtual podium to lead this panel's discourse. Ms. Williams. Okay, so I believe that we're experiencing some technical difficulties with our moderator. So if you can permit us a few seconds to get her back on the call, and we will continue today's session. So I'm seeing Ms. Unique Williams back on the call. She's a licensed social worker, and as indicated prior, she is going to be our moderator for today's first segment. Ms. Williams, the floor is all yours. And while we wait for Ms. Williams to set up, on the call, we do have Ms. Chelsea Ramjatan and Ms. Emily Phillips. So they are our two panelists for this segment. On the call, we do have Ms. Chelsea Ramjatan and Ms. Emily Phillips. They are our two panelists. Okay, so these things happen. And this is what occurs when things are live, but we're going to improvise. Yes, and we're going to have some fruitful discourse, of course. So I'll pose the first question to Ms. Ramjatan. Tell me exactly how has your experience been? I would say pre and post pandemic.
Good afternoon, everyone. Post-pandemic, pre-pandemic, sorry, I would say I was getting along well with my studies, nothing too crazy. And it was easier since everything was planned for you in a way. your teachers would, your schedule was planned out. You had your timetable and you had to follow that, as well as during COVID, we still had this schedule, but it was a bit more flexible since you were online. You know, some days you might wake up and think, I'm not really feeling to go on to class today. So that would definitely contribute to the learning loss. So post-pandemic, I would say it affected my outlook on academics, not taking it as seriously as I should have, and as I did pre-pandemic, because it seemed optional since I had to set my schedule to, you know, you really had to be disciplined and know how to manage your time well to succeed. I think you're muted.
Yes. Right. So I was basically indicating that you had to be resilient and adaptable. This was something completely new to you, foreign to all of us. And yet still you were able to have that level of stick-to-itiveness and ensure that you succeeded. I will ask the same question to Ms. Phillips. Exactly how was your experience with that transition from pre to post COVID?
Hi, good afternoon. I
Good
agree
afternoon.
with a lot of what you said, and honestly, it was very comforting because I thought it was just me. Definitely, especially since for me, right after secondary school, I went straight into university. So I still kind of had that mindset where everything was set out as a schedule, and it was easier for me to make the smoother transition into university, where, you know, there's not as many guidelines, like no teachers are going to be coming to you and asking you for assignments. Everything is up to you and
Yes.
whether or not you want to study or you want to do it. So then, as she said, when everything went online, a lot of stuff kind of fell to the background and became, well, it felt like it became optional, because you always have that thought in your brain. You're like, okay, yeah, I can go back and watch this later. I don't need to pay attention to it now. And then suddenly it's exam season and you have 4 lectures to watch the night before an exam.
Yes.
So
Yes.
definitely, especially going back out to school after that and making the shift to in-person exams and in-person lectures and whatnot, it's a bit of a blow to your productivity when you haven't been doing it for around like 2 years.
Very in-depth perspective. And at this point, I would like to let everyone know that we are not only fielding questions from the chat, this current Zoom chat, we're also fielding questions from our social media platforms, both on WRAPTT as well as on NIHERST pages. So some of the questions from the chat, I'm also going to pose this question to Ms. Phillips, sort of following her initial statements. If you can elaborate a bit more on what you believe the definition of learning loss to be, because each one of you, yourself and Chelsea, sort of hinted to that aspect of learning loss. Are there any changes in your attitude towards, let's say, your school life, your personal life, that balance, that work or student life balance? So if you can kind of give the viewership a better understanding on what is your interpretation or your understanding of learning loss. And then we can also address the other component of if there's sufficient balance, if you have experienced that balance thus far.
Okay, so for me, learning loss would personally refer to my motivation to do schoolwork, or the capacity, not even like just as myself, just seeing it from my peers as well throughout the semester, how the switch to online really affected people's morale in terms of how they went about their schoolwork and just the general quality of, you know, everything being online. So there's less incentive to take notes or study or learn, because you're like, okay, yeah, all the notes are on my laptop, all the lectures are recorded. there's more distractions at home rather than being like, you know, on a campus with your peers. Just the entire social aspect of university, which isn't just good for like a holistic approach, because you know, what was the thing with Jack, all work and no play and that
Yes,
kind of
yes,
stuff.
yes.
So being stuck inside, there's like no study groups, no social aspect of it. So I think that a lot of people just demotivation to do the worst part of university for some people, because you know a lot of people go for the social aspect. That's a huge part of campus life and whatnot, making friends and networking and all that stuff. So I
Yes.
think that the loss of that over COVID not only affects people's like morale and study habits now that we're back out in person, but also I feel like a lot of people are kind of making up for lost time in terms of the social aspect. So the time management of like the social and school life is a bit skewed. I've seen.
Yes, yes, yes. Happens. Because this is new territory to all of us. Yes. So, how exactly have you overcome challenges faced by COVID as a student? So, we are aware that, many of us would have had to learn virtual tools to get the necessary education. But what are some other challenges that you were able to overcome during this whole COVID pandemic?
Honestly, for me, somebody who's like extroverted and whatnot, the shift to
Okay.
online was really hard for me
Mhm.
in terms of like inspiration and whatnot to get things done. I definitely think that going back out, one of the ways that I've kind of coped with that and like my study strategies to get myself back on track is trying to put myself back into the mindset how I was when all the way back when I was doing CSEC, because those were probably the last really important in-person exams that I had. So I kind of had to backtrack all the way there to pick back up study habits and then build off of that to rebuild all these skills that I would have lost over COVID, because there
Mhm.
were so many times where I feel like I hadn't picked up a pen in months. And that was really
Yes.
affecting how I was retaining information, because a lot of it, especially coming down to the end of it, the courses and whatnot, it felt like most of my information was more on active recall rather than actual remembrance and in-depth
Mhm.
learning of what the actual subject matter would have been.
Mhm. 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 Thank you for giving us your perspective on that. So I also wanted to touch on the transition, the physical transition, and this is a question to Chelsea. So Chelsea, how can someone feel safe on a college campus and not get anxiety about COVID? Because remember, we're now reducing some of the guidelines, some of the intensity relative to wearing of mask, etc. So you are on campus while not wearing a mask or being around people not wearing a mask. How can someone feel safe on a college campus? What have you done to feel safe while you're maneuvering throughout the campus with those two groups of persons, persons wearing masks and persons not wearing masks? Mhm.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Uh,
That's okay.
are you seeing me okay?
I am. I am.
So I think it's really up to you now to provide what would make you feel comfortable, your own sanitization, your wipes, your hand sanitizer. You can follow your own guidelines, even though guidelines they are not as intense as they were. You can still, maintain social distancing. You can still wear a mask. Um, I know a lot of people, instead of using communal like condiments and stuff like that, they use their own, they bring their own and use that. And that kind of helps reduce that anxiety about um, spreading germs.
Hmm. Yes. Yes. So basically you focus on you and you do what you feel comfortable with. You manage your expectations, you manage your space. Thanks for your contribution. And as we're talking about learning spaces, I also wanted to kind of get an understanding of your preference. So virtual versus, let's say, that physical or even that hybrid experience. What have been some of your observations and what would have been your, not only your experience, but what would be your preference in terms of the different learning spaces? We are aware that prior, solely physical, inside of the classroom. We understand that there's also strictly virtual, but there's also that blended approach, that hybrid approach. So if you can kind of give us some insight on what is your preferred method of learning.
I think I prefer in person, as you are able to understand better, at least for me, because the you it feels the way it did before COVID, before going online and having to do virtual classes, or even, as you said, the hybrid approach. So it just takes you back into that mentality that this is not optional, as I thought with online classes. Although online classes had some upsides where, when it comes to academics, in my opinion, I was able to really put more time into certain areas, into certain subjects, and really excel in those courses. But whereas now, where you have classes all day and you kind of can't really just skip a class as easily as you would if we were doing virtual classes. So everything you have to manage your time wisely to be able to maintain a certain quality of work.
Well said. Well said. And to you, Emily, you are, I believe, in your third year at the University of the West Indies. But what sort of advice would you give to a college-bound student who wishes to prepare for college? Because from my understanding, there's still going to be that merger between the physical and the virtual learning or teaching model. From time to time, there's also always going to be that blend. So in preparation of this new teaching style, what can you say to a college-bound student to give them some sort of insight, or give them a better understanding of what they can expect, or advice? Yes.
Okay, so first thing, I give this advice to all my friends who are now coming into university. When you're picking your classes, you might be accustomed to waking up early and doing 8 a.m. from high school and whatnot, but 8 a.m. in university is a different kind of 8 a.m. So if you can choose to set your schedule around when you think you work best, sometimes you have solidified classes where you can't move it, but for us, and I'm sure other universities, we have these things called tutorials, and you can choose when you have those. So I think it's best to align your schedule to how it would suit you, whether you would work better if you have all your classes in one little clump and be like, okay, from this hour to this hour, I'm going to do this kind of work, and so on and so forth. And also, don't depend too much on uploaded resources. Use those as a backup or something supplemental to notes or anything that you're taking in lectures. Because one thing about lectures is that in the lecture itself, don't be afraid to ask questions. I feel like, especially with me, somebody who's been on campus before COVID and then after COVID, with a class of a lot of people who would have started university online and whose first time on campus, even in year 3, is right now. After being online and coming back out to classes, it's a lot quieter. People are less
Hmm.
likely to interact and ask questions and stuff in class. And I feel like interaction with your lecturers is definitely super important, because if you ask a question, you might be helping a lot of other people in the class who are too shy to, go forth and ask. And it's a learning experience for everybody involved, because you get to go over more course content. And then when you get good with your lecturers, they might be more susceptible to give you like hints for exams and stuff, like on topics and whatnot, because they're
Mhm.
gonna know the general consensus of the class. So like, if everybody is accustomed asking questions when they're confused, then when a teacher is giving you a topic, depending on the class's reaction to how they're teaching the topic, they would know whether or not there's more things that they need to go over. And it helps the entire class, because you now have more time given to issues where issues that most of the class would face.
Mhm. Yes. Thank you for sharing. So at this point, we'd just like to give a gentle reminder to persons on the call that you can ask via the chat button any questions to the panelists. We do have two university students on the call, Ms. Chelsea Ramjatan and Ms. Emily Phillips. So Ms. Ramjatan, and this would be a question that I'm going to pose to both yourself as well as Emily. What can parents do to help their students prepare for college? In your opinion, what do you think your parents or a parent can do to help students prepare for college?
I think parents or guardians can just be a support system and hear what their child needs to feel comfortable to transition to this next step in their life,
Mhm.
and to help them adjust as best as possible. Going from high school into university is a pretty drastic change. So I think that just giving them the support, that should help them adjust better.
Mhm. And Emily, your thoughts on the same question?
I don't think I have much to add to that. I agree with everything she said. I think that the emotional support aspect is definitely a huge part of it. It's hard moving into university from high school in general. And so after 2 years of, impromptu online school, it might be harder for some people to make the huge move from, high school and being online to being on a campus, especially if you're going to be going away for school. So I agree with her with the emotional support and parents being able to provide anything that would help their child make the more comfortable transition into campus life.
Sure, thank you so much. So I'm seeing a question in the chat, and it is from a Ms. Findra Kanai. Right, so I'm going to have this question open to both panelists. So is long COVID talked about and dealt with at the university? So to Chelsea and Emily, has that topic come up at all at the universities? And also, just to give you an understanding of the aspect of long COVID, it's a chronic debilitating form of COVID and affects concentration and energy levels. And another aspect of the question would be, how can students with long COVID function at university? Is there any support? So has this topic been articulated at the two different institutions that you all attend? And if you can share some insight on that, was there any support offered to students relative to long COVID?
This one was, I don't know who's supposed
So
to
we
go
can
first.
start with Emily, your spotlight.
Okay.
Yes.
No, I've never heard it come up before. It might have been maybe guild up or campus update newsletters, but I don't read all of them, so I'm not exactly sure if it's been brought up there before.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of accommodations for exams and whatnot, like with my lecturers, if there's any kind of issues, they're always open to being contacted and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
And then also for UE, we have free healthcare because there's the health and service unit that you can go and you can get doctor's notes and whatnot. So I think that if a student were to go to their lecturers and they would have like their doctor's note and whatnot, I'm pretty sure that the lecturers would be able to accommodate them however they would need. I don't see that being an issue. Hopefully that is a very correct statement. But yeah, that's my stance.
Yes, thank you. And Chelsea, I know you represent the University of Maryland, Baltimore County, Maryland. What is your perspective on this same question?
I agree with Emily. I haven't seen anything about long COVID. I haven't heard anything about it either, but that could just be because I missed something. So I'm not sure if it has been discussed, but I know that UMBC has a lot of COVID support in place. We have free on-campus testing, and it is open to students and their family, I believe. So that, and I think that once you have been tested and you provide this information, it's all sent to your lecturers via email, so you don't have to be in contact with anyone else after being tested. And you are able to view the classes online without, on your record, it shows that you missed classes or anything.
Okay. Thank you for the contribution. We do also have another question from the chat, and it is directed to Ms. Phillips. Ms. Phillips, having been on campus before, you mentioned that you are a student of the University of the West Indies. How exactly did you remain connected to your classmates during COVID, the heightened period of COVID, and was staying connected important to you?
Staying connected definitely was important to me. I was having like the best week of my life before COVID hit, and then me and my friends, we were all super sad. We were like, oh yeah, we'll see each other in 2 weeks, and then 2 weeks turned into 2 years. So I for sure wish that I could have stayed connected to everybody that I would have met around that time, but unfortunately that's not really how things work out a lot, even with the age of like social media and whatnot, where you can be connected to everyone anywhere all the time. Just the individual one-on-one talking is not gonna be enough to maintain a friendship for everybody. And then especially for me, I went into university right after CSEC because I didn't do CAPE. So
Understood.
when I was on campus, I would have been doing N1, which is the pre-science program. So for me, a lot of my friends did CAPE. So normally when you have friends who are in different learning institutions, you guys would go out and hang out outside of school, whether it be like movies, the mall, limes, that kind of stuff. But then with COVID, none of that was able to happen. And then with the differing school schedules and then different workloads and all of that stuff, you just tend to lose contact with people because you both get so tied up in all the stuff that you have to do. There's friends who are touch and go where you can like touch base with them every month or so or whenever you guys have free time. But just over those 2 years and not being able to freely have contact with people, it really severs a lot of connections, which is really unfortunate.
And thus far, what exactly have you done to try to mend those relationships? Or is it that because of the challenges with COVID, you all separated and you did not seek to repair that relationship? Or was it just a matter of it is what it is, and we'll continue to live as how we are living? What exactly would you have done Yes.
For some of them, it definitely is more of a it is what it is situation. But there's a lot of people that, one, I was really happy to reconnect with over social media because we still had that form of contact, and conversations would have been ongoing, or like video calls and that kind of stuff to keep up to date. And then also with campus reopening, there would have been some people that I would have befriended while we were online during COVID in some of my classes. And then there's also people who I would have been in high school with who have now finished CAPE and would be on campus as well. And then friends who I would have known before when I was in N1 who are also going to be on campus. So that whole first week on campus, it was really nice to see not just me and a lot of my friends who have reconnected, but just everybody else, seeing people that they haven't seen in 2 years, a lot of like old high school friends, or even they have this thing where they say like, everybody's in UE. So you walk down the corridor, you'll see like a cousin you haven't seen in 5 years. I saw one of my god sisters who I haven't seen since I was like 8. So being able to be out in the public and in a school environment again was really refreshing to be around, and it was definitely like a big serotonin boost to being able to see all my friends and stuff again.
Yes, yes. Excellent, excellent. So before we wrap up the session on learning loss and the college student, I really would like to mention to all of our participants that you do have a chance of winning an Amazon gift card. And if you stay for the entire duration of today's session, your chances will only increase. So we wanted to definitely mention that to you here. Yes, thank you. And to our panelists, if you can provide us with any sort of closing remarks, anything that you'd like to resonate with persons on the call, anything that you'd like to share to ensure that we have a lasting impression. What exactly would you like to impart to our listening and viewing audience? Ms. Ramjatan?
I would like to say that you really have to be resilient in the time that we just went through, and who knows what the future may hold. You have to be prepared for the unexpected and know how to adjust accordingly to succeed.
Yes, that is a great takeaway. Prepare for the unexpected. Thank you so much for your contribution. And Emily?
For me, it's more advice for people who are either now going into university or are now on campus for the first time, especially as this first semester comes to a close, and a lot of people would have gotten a better feel for campus life and whatnot at this point. Don't be afraid to go out and try new things. Join a club, talk to some people, join a study group. University is one of those places where they say you do like a lot of networking, or you can meet like your future lawyer in the food court or something like that. So I think it's important to put yourself out there a bit and, make some friends in your degree, outside of your degree, try new things. University is important, grades are important for sure, but there's also, there's a life outside of school, and you don't want to spend your entire college life with your nose in a book and forget to, make some good friends and good memories.
Wow. Very pertinent point. Ensure that balance is maintained. You go to school, you get educated, but ensure that you do have that social balance, because it's only a short time in your life. So thank you so much for that takeaway. We really do appreciate the contributions of both of you all. And I can definitely say that it was informative. I can also speak on behalf of the audience here today that they are definitely able to take all of the information that you all presented and also pass it on to their friends, their peers, and their family members. So we do appreciate your time, and thank you so much. At this juncture, we are going to make way to our second segment, which will focus on learning loss, and the professional. And our moderator for this afternoon will be Dr. Makeda Green. So I will leave the floor open for our ICT team to give you an idea of who the upcoming panelists will be. And I will also invite Dr. Green to introduce herself. Good afternoon again, everyone.
Hello, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the COVID Learning Loss Real Talk Buzz professional panel. And we are so happy that you were here to join us today. And with us today, we have our panelists, Ms. Simone Brown, Ms. Dr. Arden Matthews, and Mr. Tewelde Daniel. And we will start off with introductions. Starting with, does anyone have a who should I start with? No? Okay, so I will start with Miss Simone Brown. She is currently, oh, and sorry to introduce myself. I am Dr. Makeda Green. I am a clinical psychologist serving the Washington, D.C., Maryland, and New York areas. It is a pleasure to be here today with you all. And I'm so happy to be and privileged to be working with NIHERST and WRAPTT for this panel that is much needed and well in time, as I should say, right? And we will start off with our bios for our lovely panelists. We have, starting with us, Miss Simone Brown. She is a first-time author and full-time school psychologist located in Washington, D.C. She has a Master of Education in School Psychology from Howard University and a Bachelor of Science in Psychology from Oakwood University. We have Dr. Arden Matthew, who is a native Washingtonian of Trinidadian descent. He holds a Doctor of Philosophy in School Psychology from Howard University, Master of Arts degree in Special Education from American University, and a Bachelor of Science degree in Technology, Education, and Industrial Arts from Montclair State University. As an educator, Dr. Matthew served in various roles in the District of Columbia Public Schools as a high school teacher and a special educator, as special coordinator. Currently, Dr. Matthew is a school psychologist for District of Columbia Public Schools. His focus is on psychological evaluations, developing behavioral interventions, academic interventions for students, and leading the research and data for the multi-tiered system of support response to intervention team, along with overseeing the medical intervention plans for students that are home hospital instruction based. As a researcher, Dr. Matthews' focus includes inclusion, examining factors that predict efficacy and attitudes towards inclusion among urban high school teachers. Dr. Matthew currently lives in Washington, D.C. with his family. Tewelde Daniel is an entrepreneur, fashion photographer, CEO and founder of Medheen Photography. Medheen Photography was birthed from the desire to leave a lasting mark in the fashion industry. Under this brand, Medheen Photography, Tewelde has covered events for Samantha Samuel of Fashion 64's Black Tie for a Cause for the Boys and Girls Club of Hudson County Fashion Show, Fashion in the Lane Runway Competition, The Ultimate Walk-Off, Jersey City Fashion Week, New York Fashion Week events, and Small Boutique Fashion Week in New Jersey and in New York. Welcome, panelists. I hope everyone has their questions ready for our panelists. This is going to be such an in-depth, great discussion for them, and I'm very excited to begin. And with that being said, we will get right into something that we as professionals and as people moving into this period of COVID, post-pandemic, and getting back into that work-life balance. So we can start off with that. And just wanting to ask everyone, what does your work-life balance look like currently?
Well, good afternoon, everyone, or good evening. I would just say the work balance since the height of the pandemic has been challenging, to say the least. Having to schedule and kind of bullet point tasks throughout the day is essential for me to navigate through the day, for me to spend time with my son, who's in that adolescent stage, also to take work home and actually invest in the time and effort that I need to actually be productive at home. So everything has to be done based on scheduling, more so now, due to some of the long-term effects after the height of the pandemic.
Thank you, Dr. Matthew. We will pivot just really quickly. My apologies. We did not, and actually, this was a good thing because we actually saved it the best for last. We almost forgot about the quintessential Carol David. And so we will pause for a minute, Dr. Matthew. I do apologize for that. Carol David, who is based currently in Trinidad and Tobago. Give me one second. My apologies, everyone. Carol David is known for utilizing project management and agile project management skills to implement complex solutions geared at digitally transforming organizations for them to compete in disruptive and dynamic environments. Ms. David is recognized for the development and execution of holistic people management solutions and the development of roadmaps for organizations, strategic direction, and human resources strategies. She has comprehensive business acumen, which allows for the delivery of commercial and retail superior results. These capabilities and competencies were gained over 19 years as an executive in various industries: oil and gas, transportation, education, telecommunications, construction, health, and airline. Ms. David is currently a member of the Industrial Relations Advisory Committee and a non-executive director within Agostini Insurance Brokers. Previously, Carol David sat on the executive committee for the Commonwealth Telecommunications Organization, CTO, chairperson for the Personal Development Training Management Committee of the CTO Director, TT Post Board, and a member of a task force to reform health services for the Tobago Regional Health Authority. Today, Ms. David is the owner and lead consultant of eCore Consulting, a human resources and business consulting company. And Carol, Ms. David, we are so happy that you are here on the call with us. Like I said earlier, we saved the best for last, and we are so happy that you are here to provide us with your perspective on work-life balance. And Dr. Matthew just shared with us his, so we can pivot to you and you can provide us with your understanding on your perspective on work-life balance.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for that introduction. What I've realized is the blurring of the line between work and your personal experiences and existence. It has become difficult because now, for a lot of us, work is home and home is work. And it creates certain dynamism, not only for yourself, but for your family. For my kids, if I'm home, I am mommy. So there are things I have to do. And when I'm at work, I'm at work. So when I'm home and still have to work, it confuses them. Work-life balance for me, I have been able to manage it effectively by putting ground rules. The times I work, when I spend time with my family, what I do with my family. And that has helped tremendously because it then places everybody on the same page. We all now understand when it is work and when it is time for family time. Now, it has not been an easy journey. They've gotten through it kicking and screaming. But we're working on it, and it is being successful for now, I have to say.
Thank you, Ms. David. And that sounds in alignment with what Dr. Matthew was talking about with bringing in, bringing in and having those transitions between parent and professional. And we can bring in Ms. Brown, who's going to give us another perspective for that work-life balance.
Yes. Something that I heard from Ms. Carol, you shared, what I took from it was boundaries, having boundaries. And that is ideally where I strive to, maintain my work-life balance, having boundaries. So when I go home, I'm not bringing in work. That's ideally speaking. With the nature of work, it can be hard. It can be very hard to not bring work home when deadlines are deadlines. But I really try to focus on my self-care because at the end of the day, like, it won't be balanced if my self-care is not, if I'm not practicing self-care. I can't balance anything because my mind will be all over the place. But it has been a struggle, but it's a work in progress.
And that's all that it is, right? It's a work in progress. And coming from I'm jumping around a little bit, right? But just hearing what you're saying and hearing what Dr. Matthew and Ms. David was saying is, coming from the pre-COVID where everything was 100% in person to then within a week or 2 weeks, I know for as psychologists, we had maybe 5 days to get ourselves together, and then we were 100% remote. And then now we were kind of hybrid, kind of in person, maybe not, maybe 2 days in person, 3 days home in remote. And then now we're 5 days back in person. So how has that transition been? And this has all been within the last 2.5 years, right? So from 2019 to 2022, we've seen this pivot. So how has that transition been?
I can start. So for me, I was actually still in my master's program when COVID-19 happened. So it really feels like I've been like, most of my career has been post-COVID. And so the way my career trajectory went, like, it was virtual 100%. And then the next, I think it was maybe 9 months later, I was completely like in person again. So I enjoyed going back in person. It allowed me to gather more information like about my students. But it was really hard with kind of understanding what the impact COVID left on the individuals that I work with. And so it's been a lot. It's been a lot, but essentially most of my work has been, in COVID. And so I don't know if I'm going away from the original question. Am I going away? Am I? But yes, it was an easy transition back into the school, only because it allows my job to, it is easier to do my job when I'm fully in person. But just understanding like what are the impacts of COVID rather than just regular learning problems in my role.
As an executive in an organization, I had a dual role. So I had to bring employees, the professionals, back into the workplace and also bring myself back into the workplace. But what made the transition not as difficult is the kind of planning and preparation that was put in place as employees move to remote work. We had just completed an exercise where we were looking at functions of various persons in the organization. What exactly do you do? And how is it supported by technology? We were able to identify what was needed for you to go to work remotely, and that made it easier for us to bring the employee back out. One big thing we did was the identification of a tool wherein we were able to identify functions for various categories of workers. And if you require a service, you put in your request, and the person who is to deliver the service to you is alerted. That person is made aware of exactly what you're asking for, and you have to feedback within a time frame within which you will deliver the service the person is requesting. Because of those supporting systems, the transition of the work was easy. But when it came to the fears, the anxiety about COVID and what it can do, people complained about having relatives who were over 90, relatives over 80, and having comorbidities. That the convincing, the communication of saying, no, you're gonna be safe, we're gonna put things in place. It was more the fear on their side, on the employee side, the concerns on the employee side that made it difficult. For me, I had to live what I was speaking about. If I'm saying it is safe, I can't be timid about coming to work. So I was at work, all masked up, performing all the hygiene things and communicating consistently with the employees in the organization. In fact, I actually led the task force that did the preparation, did the planning, and did the bringing back of employees into the organization. It was a tight dance. It was not, I would never say it was a smooth transition, but people had enough information to make it a movement that was not as filled with anxiety if we did not do the planning and the preparation.
Yes, to Ms. Davis' point, they're making the transition back in the educational field, especially from virtual to in-person, was there was heightened anxiety, not only from just the staff, administration, the school district tried to promote a sense of self-care, tried to put in several safeguards, but we transitioned back in small group in March of 2021. We focused on the students with needs, the most needs, the ones that were that had low social economic status, those who had less supports at home. We invited them back in small cohorts into the building. These were students that may not have had supervision at home during the full virtual period, and those with certain disabilities or disorders. So we allowed them to come back in. Of course, we had an abbreviated day when students returned, but they gave teachers the option of coming back or returning. It was strictly on a voluntary basis. But as we came back in full throttle in August of 2021, most of us were double masked up. They did random testing, they did contact tracing. And every time when there was a positive case of COVID, There were several emails that went out, several notifications, and we were just at the point where vaccinations were coming into play. As the year went by, the mask restrictions were removed, and at this present time, we have several staff members out that are out with COVID. There are staff members in particular at my school that have been positive in three different times. So it's played a lot as far as just morale, or the impact on morale as far as just having to cover classes. I've never covered classes as a service provider, and not as frequently as I have at any time in my career. So that anxiety that everyone has mentioned is definitely present, and still now, not as much, but we're still trying to figure out what the long-term effects are going to be. You look at the data now, from most of the data on COVID is from 2020 to 2021, but we're going to have to pretty much collect as much data as we can, look at, do surveys with adults, parents, administrators, to see what these long-term effects were or are, and how we're still sort of making this transition. The fear was that we were going to go back out again to a total virtual format. So it's still there's still several questions.
And I was, and to transition to another point, talking about bringing in different people and having those interactions with other coworkers and leading those task force, as Ms. David was talking about, creating those relationships, like Ms. Brown said, having those conversations, as Dr. Matthews referring to, and bringing in Mr. Daniel to talk about this as well. But how has it been? What have you seen within workplace mental health with COVID and with the lasting effects? So Dr. Matthew did just touch on it just a little bit, but what has the mental health been in your spaces? Now, this question is not to be a venting session. We are recording live, so we're not going to talk about any coworkers. I'm just joking, but but let's just talk about the eco space that we are in, and that mental health, and the mental health that the observations that we're seeing with people's mental health. And Ms. David did touch on it just a little bit. We're talking about maybe people's personal lives, but how has that, what have you seen? What has been your observations?
I'll just say that, I'm typically servicing students, but this year my principal wanted to have a session on just staff wellness. Staff wellness is a precursor to student wellness. If teachers are not mentally prepared, they have fears, anxieties about just coming to work. And again, these fears and anxieties have been reduced, I would say, from the previous school year when we fully came back, because we were coming into the unknown. Our students are not going to be well served. So we allotted a half a day just to discuss. It was almost like not a gripe session, but just to get feelings overall from staff members, to see where they were at mentally, and discussing self-care first and foremost. I've been sort of the go-to in my building. We currently have on our mental health team, we have myself, we have three social workers, two which are out on leave now. We also have a guidance counselor. So we have been working under tremendous stress, servicing those students coming, back in person that have their own mental health concerns. But I would say compassion fatigue has been a major concern of mine with certain health providers. And, with, again, having that work balance, work home balance has been very difficult to kind of figure out. But I think this is going to be a continuum indefinitely until we get or arrive to I guess, our new normal that will just pretty much be, yes, excuse me, it'll just be our new normal. I'll just say that, our new normal. We have to get accustomed to our new normal until we figure that out. Whatever that may look like, we will arrive.
And living in Trinidad and Tobago has its own challenges as it relates to mental health. It's not something we speak about. It is not something that we openly recognize. So in organization, we are not in a rush to see signs and symptoms of mental illness and classify it as such. So the person is a troublemaker. The person don't like to work. The person is creating problems. Those are the normal labels we put to the signs and symptoms of mental illness. So in organizations now, we have to make a quantum leap, a shift in our mindset as it relates to treating with, recognizing, and admitting that COVID-19, or even before COVID-19, there have been issues around mental illness in organizations. It was an abrupt separation for a lot of employees in organizations. Today, you're here interacting with your co-workers, having a laugh in the kitchen, having a chat by the water cooler. And tomorrow, you're at home trying to figure it out. And in Trinidad and Tobago, COVID-19 did not only come with anxiety around contracting COVID, it also came with the threat of job loss. And when that is happening in a small society like Trinidad and Tobago, it is almost mind-boggling. So people were grappling, trying to cope, trying to figure out what they should do to remain relevant to the organization. We've always had employee assistance programs, and we always categorize the people who would utilize employee assistance programs. It was amazing the amount of people who suddenly saw it as a lifesaver, suddenly saw it as a way of dealing with their issues. And it was not only the employees or individual contributors in the organization, it was also executive grappling with what was happening. So I believe coming out of it, and the whole issue about mental illness, our mindset in organization has changed. We are more willing to speak about it. We are more willing to admit that mental illness is a real issue in organization, and it needs to be treated with more than just an employee assistance program. We now realize that leaders and managers in organizations must be trained to address these issues if we have to sustain and build successful organizations.
And have you seen an increase in friction or greater level of empathy and understanding amongst coworkers? So with having this type of, seeing some of the effects that we've seen in the greater society within your own spaces, have you seen an increase in friction or empathy in understanding of loved ones or personal lives, or has it just been nope, work, go home?
That question was directly to me or to the panel?
Well, to everyone, to the panel.
So I did you finish the there?
I think what I observed myself is a bit of both. So in the beginning, there was a lot of empathy because, we didn't understand what was happening. And there was a lot of confusion and a lot of fear. So a lot of us, more people, I should say, were on the side of erring caution and trying to follow the rules. And as time went along, I think some people just got tired of it, got fed up with it. And you saw and this is person to person, this is not like from, the bosses and the businesses and stuff like that. I think on their end, there was a lot more empathy, a lot more working with people, a lot more trying to work things out with people to keep them, to keep them around, because they knew at some point this thing will fade off, and then they didn't want to be at a position where if they have certain staff, certain employees that are valuable, lose them because they didn't want to work with them. So I would say on the business end, I definitely saw way more understanding. So aside from my entrepreneurship, I do have a 9-to-5, and the company has continued to offer working, I think one day a week at home. Some people wish they could do it more. Some people got tired of it. Some people, they have kids and they're like, it's more frustrating being at home. But I think there was this weird dynamic where person to person, so they're basically like three people who want to follow the instructions, follow the rules, get your shots and everything. People who on the opposite side who like, the conspiracy theorists, and then the people in the middle that kind of balance it out. So having the people on the two extremes kind of a lot of times have like this tug and pull, and usually you have employees wanting to have each other's back and be on each other's side, and then you have the company now being a bit more open to accepting if somebody complains, they're not gonna try to bug them down, try to diminish how they feel about it. So that was something that was definitely unique that I observed. Yeah.
Just to piggyback off of what Mr. Daniel said, I kind of saw both as well, some positives and some negatives. So the positives is that in my space of work, the people who felt comfortable going in, protected and everything, they were able to kind of like help carry the caseload of like somebody else, or won't not carry the caseload, but like, for example, if an assessment needed to be done and one of the psychologists didn't feel comfortable going in, another psychologist who did feel comfortable, like they went in and they kind of like maybe swamped different like tasks. And then being under the mental health, like we were kind of the look to for like, okay, how do we, tell parents, other teachers and kids to protect their mental health? So like, since we were the ones giving out that information, like my boss was very big on like, hey, do what you're comfortable with. And so I felt kind of like safe to, or free to do what I wanted, what I thought was comfortable for me. And on the other end, when the vaccine started to come out, I did see a little like judgment when it came to the people who decided to get the vaccine and who didn't. A lot of coworkers may have like, I saw a lot of like people asking like, oh, well, what did you do? Like, are you getting the vaccine? And then if a person said they didn't, it would be, I could sense a little judgment. But overall, I do feel like it helped build camaraderie and like just empathy overall. I do believe that.
I would say even, from my own, I saw a little bit of both as well. But I saw it in different spaces. So when I was when I got pregnant in the midst of COVID, but while I was pregnant, I saw a lot of like, okay, it's okay, don't worry about it. And then once I delivered, I saw, can you get this done now? Can you do this? Can you do that? So it was kind of like that back to work kind of mentality, because there was such a shortage, especially now people, because there was a lot of shortage in our field as psychologists. So there was a lot of heightened need, and the urgencies became emergencies, and it just became 911s after a while. And so they just didn't, I was in some spaces where they just didn't care, whether you were breastfeeding or maternity leave, it didn't matter. Like they just needed you, and it is what it is, and just get out there regardless if there was a vaccine or not. However, when I relocated into other areas, I saw more empathy. So similar to, it depended on where you were and where you were working. And again, that feeling of the vaccine was also pivotal as well, because if they felt that the vaccine was more important, then there was more of an empathy there towards your towards COVID, and maybe your relationship to COVID, whether it be through a loved one or through, just you getting it, or maybe you being an indirectly being impacted by it, as opposed to those locations or those areas where the vaccine wasn't seen as, it was almost like a judgmental, as Ms. Brown said, like it was, they kind of looked at you, well, what, they just didn't care. Did anyone else have any? I was going to go to another question, but I saw Ms. David didn't have. Were you ready to talk, or?
Yeah. When I think about what has happened in the organization, it has a lot to do with where the organization is at. COVID dealt a solid blow to most organizations. They can open, they can do business, they won't get in the sales they expected, the kinds of service they normally get at a certain time. And it was easier for them to drive survival and drive sustainability. Yes, they had empathy, but listen, for me to survive and for you to continue in a job, you need to be doing certain things. So I'm going to do all the hygiene things. I found myself in situations where employees would call and say, sanitizer ran out and we need sanitizer, so we're not working. So when you are an employer and you're faced with situations like that, you are torn. You just don't know if it is all about fear, so therefore I need to appease the situation, or if it is being worked, especially if you're working in a unionized environment. And that, I think, we've not had enough conversations about that, about how different it is in one environment against the other, how different it is when an organization is just fighting for survival. And it's difficult for them to say, oh, I empathize with you, so take 3 months and spend it with the baby and things like that. These were some of the challenges we were faced with as executives in organizations, as managers in organizations. Yes, you had some empathy, but a lot of it was situational. Dr. Green, I think you are on mute.
Yes, I just realized that I was muted and having my own conversation here. So and pivoting to the next question, to the next area, and that is looking at how we can remain resilient and how we can continue to stay, vigilant for ourselves. And we talked about we talked about the ways that people felt about the vaccine, or the ways that we can take care of ourselves. And in what ways can we, because now we're in a space where, especially in the States, it's like a triple-demic, right? There's the RSV, there's the flu, there's the pneumonia. Actually, it should be quaddemic, as you can say. Pneumonia, RSV, flu, cold, COVID 5, so quintdemic. I think that's a word now. I'll copyright it and make it my own. And so we see here that there's so much going on. And people are not, you have some people that are wearing masks, some people that are not wearing masks. I know my son's school, they're starting to send out emails in bold highlighted caps, however much more they can emphasize it, saying, please bring a mask for your child to our school. And so how can we do, how do you feel about that? What is some of the expectations? What are some of your perspectives on that? I'm not trying to get into a debate here about mask, no mask. We went through that. That was circa 2021. But what is your take on on that in this time?
Well, I'll say we definitely have to continue to safeguard ourselves as adults. Those of us with children at home that are school age, we know that they are exposed primarily to various germs, viruses, et cetera. Especially those, I know, Dr. Green, yourself, with your little one in daycare, they say it's almost good to just have them exposed. Prior to the pandemic, it was just good to have them exposed to so many things so they could build that immunity to things. But I make a practice at home to wear a mask. I try to encourage my son, who was an adolescent. I'm not able to monitor him at school. I don't know the frequency as to when he's wearing masks. I'm just going to go under the assumption that he is not wearing a mask like he used to. I was just looking at in the corner of my office. What we typically do when we have students that are out for extended periods of time, for winter break, any holidays, any extended time, we have a test to return. So doing like the rapid antigen test for COVID, it won't hurt. I know in the US, they have also just distributed these things out. Here's one. This is an example of one. I'm not advertising any particular manufacturer or anything, but some students now, they have received so many, they have them stocked up in the house. The White House has just released funding for more rapid antigen tests. But I would say just monitor yourself weekly when you do have symptoms. Even though, like Dr. Green had mentioned, we don't know if my mother had walking pneumonia about a year ago at this time. So we, of course, had to go through all of the emotions of trying to see if it was actually COVID. My mother's 83 years old, but come to find out it was walking pneumonia. But my mother gets every vaccination there is in the world, from the pneumonia shot to shingles to all of the most updated COVID vaccine. But safeguarding ourselves, we know that our children are pretty much, I won't say robust when it comes to just getting through these illnesses, especially COVID. We know that for the most part, they'll just may have some symptoms. My son ended up with COVID actually eventually, which was the inevitable before his age range was eligible for vaccination. He had a day where he just had cold symptoms and then just went on about his business and stayed home and had to do virtual learning from home. But we know that our kids are going to be, for the most part, safeguard around this, but we as adults have to really make sure we're getting the proper exercise, consuming the right, foods, making sure that we're getting our vitamin D. So I think that's the best we can do at this time with the new normal. And it's always, even though I may look like the odd one out with a mask on in public places, just looking at a report today, the numbers are increasing, hospitalizations are increasing now. We're getting at a peak moment in the US to where hospitalizations are going up, and unfortunately there are deaths. So we just have to do our best at safeguarding like we did right when we came back to in person to work and the normal ways of society.
From what I'm hearing, or what is coming from Dr. Matthew, he actually echoes my sentiment. I think right now, our ability to be accountable is now at the forefront. I remember trying to implement or working with an organization to implement a culture of accountability. And every time I think about when the government of Trinidad and Tobago said, you are not compelled to wear masks. You can, as organizations, decide what you're going to do. As individuals, you're going to decide what you're going to do. That decision by the government made all of us accountable for our own safety. You saw a shift. A lot of people who were resisting the wearing of masks suddenly were wearing masks. Because, who are you going to blame if something happens to you? So we had an increase in the wearing of masks in some areas. My positioning, and that's a position I've taken for myself, that is something I instill in my children. My daughter works, and my son is at university. I tell them, wear it, even if it has to kill you. Wear the mask. It is a level of protection. You may feel that it is not something everybody else is doing, but you're not in it for the likes. You're in it to save your life. In the event you are exposed. Now, what can you do if co-workers are not wearing a mask? Again, your accountability. You have to be the one to practice all the hygiene, all those hygiene, safety, all those be careful action that you're supposed to. And still, even though there isn't a requirement to wash your hands before you go into some business places, I still wash my hands. I sanitize, I take my temperature, and I wear my mask. So you can't make the other person do it. But what you have to do is hold firm to your position, and you have to do it. You just have to take accountability for your own safety. And that's one way of getting through this.
So one aspect, with the data, when COVID was at its peak and everybody was home, the information came forward that most of the cases were family related, transferring family to family member, because a lot of people lived in small, live together. And I think people have become even more lax among family. So in the office space that I work with there are older ladies. I think majority of them are over 50, right? 55 and old. And so they were very cautious. The young people, they kind of always looked at us with a cross eye. If you sniffle, if you made a sound, can't blame them, right? But what's interesting is that because, how things transition, Trinidad and Tobago kind of experienced things later versus the US, and then pretty much the same thing happened there. Then the US now started to fade off, then Trinidad. So they were they were behind, but not really behind. But anyways, that's beside the point. The thing is that what I noticed that they got so relaxed when it comes to family events that we recently had about 2 or 3 of them contracted. And these are people that were cautious. These are people that were, if they heard any of the younger people sneeze, that they would go to the boss and be like, hey, let them know, stay away for a day, let them know, get tested. So I think when it comes to being around family, I think we're more relaxed. And that's one of the areas where you're finding, probably, I don't have the data for that, but that could be one of the areas where you have these increases that we're having today. So that's something we have to definitely be cautious, because you think of family, especially if a family member had it, probably didn't have that bad an effect on them. We kind of subconsciously think like, okay, it's good, but we definitely have to still be cautious. Yeah.
I would definitely agree with you on that. I would say that I've seen a lot of confusion, especially in some of the places that I've worked, in some of the sites that I go to, because you have some schools and some facilities where there are no masks. Everyone is, hashtag mask for what? And they look at me like I'm an anomaly because I'm wearing a mask. And I still vigilantly do the weekly COVID test to submit to the Department of Health and all of those things. And there are some schools that it's 100% mask. You must wear a mask. You have to wear a mask. The kids are wearing masks. They have masks available on every floor of the school at different points. They have hand sanitizer. They have all of these things. So it's almost like sometimes you're like, okay, you have to remember which area you're going to. I mean, it doesn't matter. I'm consistent. I wear a mask, but in some spaces you have to, it's not just 6 feet, it's 12 feet, right? 12 feet of distance, or making sure that you're more vigilant with how you're working with those people. I know for me, that's my attitude. It's like before, pre-COVID, maybe I would, you're not so worried about those things. Maybe during cold season, yes, but not during, not the rest of the seasons. But now every season I have a hand sanitizer, I'm washing my hands, I'm more vigilant about who I'm touching, making sure that all of the equipment, the iPads, everything that I'm using for testing are, completely sanitized before every child. Even though some staff at some schools or some sites, they'll say, no, you don't have to wear a mask here. But I'm like, no, politely just saying, it's okay. I'm a visitor, or I'm just just like, I'm the psychologist, I know I'm one of one, not one of 6. So I have to wear a mask, those kind of things. But seeing that the dynamic and even the relationship with mask wearing is so different now, that with the rise in COVID cases and the rise of, cases in general and hospitalization cases, you would expect that people would be more vigilant with wearing masks, but I'm not seeing that. And so it's definitely, as Dr. Matthew was saying, it's definitely it's definitely interesting. But we can pause for now to see if there are any questions in the live streaming areas of, I'm sorry, not areas, platforms, sorry. Any feedback via live stream? No, okay. I know that there's a question in the chat from Vindra Kanai asking about the long-term COVID effects, long-term effects that COVID is having on certain persons. And what it's, saying that it's a chronic there are chronic and debilitating presentations that are there amidst when someone does contract COVID, and it does. And some of the presentations are the effects of the concentration and energy levels. So the question to the panel is, how can a worker with long COVID function presentations function in a workplace? And is there any support for that person? So this question might be better for Miss David. I know she's coming back into the, yes, she's here. So I can repeat the question for you, Miss David.
Thank you.
So Benja Kanai in the chat and in the audience has asked, is wanting to know about speaking to persons that have contracted COVID and are experiencing chronic debilitating forms of COVID, post-COVID, and noting that some of those notes of presentation would be the concentration and energy levels. So that person is asking, how can a worker with long COVID function in workplace be supported?
Firstly, I think to a large extent, we have not done enough work to educate people in organizations about long COVID. We've not done that. If we are faced with a situation like that, the organization, it does not even require the involvement of the organization. The organization has medical plans and various other support systems that the employee can access. In the organization, though, there is where the empathy comes in. So we know you've had COVID. We know that you were out of work for some time. We are aware of how COVID impacts the employee. So the approach used for employees in the organization is to be cautious. So if the employee requires or requests certain things, it is granted. Because because the organization has a extended sick leave policy, there are persons who have been out of work for almost a year because of what COVID has done to them and their bodies. So they're still employed, their tenure is maintained, they get access to any doctor, any specialist, anyone that they need. The organization, through its medical plans, provide such care for the employees. Whether or not that conversation is alive in the organization, I can say no. It is not a conversation that you hear all the time. It is just put down to, oh, this person had COVID and is still recovering. Whether or not it is seen as long COVID, no. It is just someone who is recovering from COVID-19.
Thank you, Ms. David. That was actually right on point. We do see that, and it's something that it's not discussed. This is actually a really good question. Thank you, Vindra Kanai, for this question, because as Dr. Matthews stated before, and also Ms. David, there's a lot more data and research that needs to be done in the space of understanding COVID and the long-lasting effects of COVID, especially within the workplace. I know that I've been in spaces where they would boast about the amount of times they've had COVID, but not really discussing, but not seeing how those effects have on them, right? With their long-term medical needs, or their long-term energy levels, right? Or needing time to breathe, or needing time, or can't go up and down the stairs, as I've seen with some coworkers that I've had this past week, where they did contract COVID, and since then they haven't been able to go up and down the stairs at this work site, and unfortunately the elevator is down. So that has impacted their ability to work, and having to then shift from their offices on the 3rd floor to then having to be on the 1st floor in the conference room. So we see that there's a lot of work that needs to be done in this space. We do thank the panel for their discussion. Are there any last words? Because we have really had an in-depth conversation. I truly enjoyed this panel and our conversations and what we're doing around the professional space with COVID and post-COVID. I think that we are within our various fields, although the majority of the panel are psychologists. They do work in different spaces, guys. And although they went to the same school, they don't really know each other. So with that being said, but we're going to work on that. But with that being said, we do see a difference in some of the ways that even their sites are focusing on COVID and workplace and mental health, and even bridging that gap. So with that being said, we do thank the panel. I do have some last words. There is a question, since we do have the psychologist in the space. Trust me, this is probably something that won't happen in the next panel. There is a question that came in previously about how can they get their students to refocus post-COVID. So post being virtual and the transition from virtual to then in person, the person has noticed and observed that their child is not as focused as they used to be, or seeing that there are some focus issues. So how can they regain focus? Like, what are some strategies that we can give to some people in that? And I'm taking advantage of this moment, as we always do. We take advantage of our opportunities. So please, my fellow bison.
I would say, for instance, I focus on students in middle school or secondary education primarily. And one of the major concerns that parents have brought up are executive functioning concerns. Of course, that's a domain that most students from adolescence to, and beyond, even students in higher education, they deal with planning, lack of focus at times. Those that may have already been diagnosed with certain diagnoses such as ADHD, or those with inattention. There are several applications now where you can kind of address some of the inattention issues for students, even for yourself. There are like 2 apps that I wanted to discuss. Well, actually, I was going to just share. There's I talk about scheduling and timing. I mean, that's been a thing that I've had to focus on, even for myself, during the pandemic and even now. There's an app called the Daily Motivator app. You can, for iPhone users, you can schedule tasks for that to kind of keep you focused. With children, I would say incentivizing students, breaking tasks up, chunking them into small bits, incentivizing students or kids or children at home with things that are of interest to them. Having small intervals of tasks and having them complete that. So for instance, it's almost unrealistic to have a child to sit for an hour or even 45 minutes, sometimes even 30 minutes. So if you had to break that down to about 15 minutes for them to say focus on something, could be homework, could be a task at hand, maybe just cleaning up the room or doing a chore, having a little chart on checking off how many times they work consistently through that interval, and then providing them with an incentive towards the end. It's tough. There's another app I was going to also mention for those who have Androids. It's called the Stay on Task app. That's good for both. It's good for both children and adults. So both of these are good tools to use. I have a couple other ones I would share, but they're more so suited for students with children. I'm sorry, well, grown students like I was with children as well as adults. So you all can reach out to me if you wanted to get more information on that.
Dr. Matthews, he said a lot. Just to piggyback off of what you already said, I would say, and this was kind of implied, like breaks, having breaks built into the different tasks, movement breaks specifically as well. Having a schedule, like a visual schedule, but not being like too hard on it, incorporating breaks into that schedule, making things like hands-on, but yeah, and making things interesting. But I think that breaks are very important because it can be overwhelming. Like even for us adults, even for me, like I need breaks. Like after I complete a task, like, okay, I need a brain break. And then when kids get home, sometimes like allow them to have a break as well. I don't have any kids, but when I was a child, I didn't want to be doing work all day at school and then all day at home. So making things fun at home, like maybe incorporating like fun learning activities at home, if you know it is necessary. But yeah.
Well, I thank you all, Mr. Dr. Matthew, Ms. Brown, Mr. Daniel, and Ms. David for your expertise, your strategies, your resources, your perspectives. It is well needed. It is so great to have people in the various fields, in corporate to small business entrepreneurship, social media, psychology, and we are very excited to continue this conversation and then continue these the research and the data that's needed. At this time, we are wrapping up this panel. Everyone, please stay on. The audience, you do not want to miss the next panel. It is the parenting panel, and we are so happy to have some more experts to continue speaking on their perspectives. We have Dr. Matthew, who is providing us with some resources. So please make sure that you click on those. And to those that are staying in the audience, you will be valued, recognized, and given your flowers with an Amazon gift card. For those people, there are going to be a drawing. So you do not want to miss that. I know I sound like a marketer right now, but at the same time, just trying to make sure that we still keep our momentum and our excitement for this well-needed webinar. So with that being said, we're going to reset for the next panel. Again, I thank you all for remaining on, and we will be on in a few minutes to continue Real Talk. Hello, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the last panel of the evening. For those that are now joining us again, this is the Real Talk Buzz webinar. We are speaking on COVID learning loss. This is the parenting panel. For those that are now joining us, we are wanting to let you know that for those that have been on from 3:30 p.m. will be part of a drawing for an Amazon gift card, and that winner will be announced via email. So sometimes you have to wait at the end of this panel, but not now. They're going to give you a little bit more delay on who's going to win that Amazon gift card. So it will be provided to you via email. And just to let you know that there will be a survey that will be provided at the end as well. Please make sure that you fill that out. That's very important for us as a team. And we are so thankful for you guys to be a part of our talk today. So with that being said, I am Dr. Green. I am going to be your moderator for the parent panel, Real Talk Buzz, and where we're going to get into some experts, some parents of their own. They are all parents. So this is not one of those panels where they're experts, but they're not parents. No, they're both experts and parents at the same time. So we're going to get the best of both worlds here. And we are so excited and grateful to have them with us. So with that being said, we have Mr. Daniel that has actually been so gracious to rejoin our panel. We have Dr. Matthew, Miss Colette Burnett, and also Miss Makeda Marshall, and Miss Smith. And yes, we do have the same name. We are name twins, namesakes. Yes, so I'm very happy to have everyone with us today, and we will start with introductions of our panel. And sorry about that. So with that being said, does anyone want me to go first with their one, or we're just gonna go popcorn style? All right, so I'll choose, guys. So with that being said, we will start off with Dr. Matthew. Dr. Arden Matthew is a native Washingtonian of Trinidadian descent. He holds a Doctor of Philosophy degree in social school psychology from Howard University, Master of Arts degree in special education from American University, and a Bachelor of Science degree in technology, education, and industrial arts from Montclair State University. As an educator, Dr. Matthew served in various roles in the District of Columbia Public Schools as a high school teacher and special education coordinator. Currently, Dr. Matthew is a school psychologist for District of Columbia Public Schools. His focus is on psychological evaluations, developing behavioral interventions, academic intervention for students, and leading the research and data for the multi-tiered system of support response to intervention team, along with overseeing the medical intervention plans for students that are home hospital instruction based. As a researcher, Dr. Matthews' focus includes inclusion, examining factors that predict efficacy and attitudes towards inclusion among urban high school teachers. Dr. Matthew currently lives in Washington, D.C. with his family. We have Miss Colette Burnett, who is an entrepreneur philanthropist. She is the CEO and founder of Global Food Warriors, which is focused in over 5 countries, inclusive of Trinidad, Tobago, the United States, Ghana, Nigeria, and also Mauritius. And she is also the CEO and founder of Super Wings in Brooklyn, New York. For those that do not know, please, you have to know about Super Wings. And also she is an entrepreneur and philanthropist. We have Mrs. Marshall Smith, and she is an urban planner with a passion for improving communities through providing them the access to health, education, quality housing, economic development, and relationships. Over the last 12 years of her career, she has committed her life to mission-driven work in the areas of social work, education reform, and affordable housing. Makeda's passion lies in identifying tangible steps to improving outcomes for underdeserved communities, particularly communities of color. As an urban planner, Makeda understands many of the issues that plague historically underdeserved communities that are intertwined. She looks to understand the common causes to alleviate the disparate impact on these communities. During the day, Makeda is a mission-driven consultant that focuses on affordable housing and community development with enterprise advisors. In addition to that, Makeda has a passion for birthing justice that is rooted sovereign over their bodies. She believes that the foundation of that power results from Black women having access to information and appropriate support. Through personal experience, candid discussions with women, and independent research, she is building a foundation to understand the gaps women currently face during pregnancy. Makeda has a bachelor's degree from Boston University in international relations with a minor in African American history and a master of city and regional planning from the Bluestein School at Rutgers University. Makeda is a wife, sister, daughter, community member, and activist, but most importantly, a mother to Nina and Stokely. We have Mr. Tewelde Daniel, who is a fashion photographer based in New Jersey. He is also a social media influencer, national and board certified trainer with a Bachelor of Science, Exercise Science, and a social media influencer. He is the proud father of twin boys, and they are just robust and full of joy. Tewelde has been featured in New York Fashion Week, Small Boutique Fashion Week, a range of shows in New Jersey and New York, and he is the CEO and founder of Medheen Photography. Thank you all. This is a robust group with robust biographies. I cannot compete or compare. So we will get started with our group. So nice to have you all. Can everyone hear me? Yes. Yes. Okay, great. So with that being said, we will get started with our first question. Oh no, someone was talking. No, that was me. Okay, so we will get started with our first is, how would you describe your work-life balance at this time? Being parents, being entrepreneurs, philanthropists, experts, doctors. How are you all balancing out your work-life balance?
Well, for me, this is Colette Burnett. And as an entrepreneur, I would tell you one of the best things about working for myself is that I have to balance each day individually. So while there are routines and plans that I take part in, I also am allowed, and well, I have the freedom of being able to choose my day. So balance different every day, depends on what the need is. I have a 21-year-old son who also works and goes to school. And so spending time with him is one of my top priorities. Finding time for him is always important, but also given the freedom that I have to choose my day according to me, it really allows me to decide on any given day what's most important.
I'll hop on after you, Colette. I think, especially since I think the focus of this was also talking about the impact that COVID's had on our lives too. And when it comes to work-life balance, I think initially when we were all kind of like locked away in our homes, it provided a really cool opportunity to spend time with my family that like I would not have had otherwise. And I ended up I was pregnant when the lockdown happened. And so that was a really interesting time where while we were still working, everybody acknowledged that we were going through a worldwide pandemic. There was a little bit of grace. And I think we all had like a shift in priorities. However, I think what's been the most difficult in the world opening back up that same grace isn't offered. And even though things aren't necessarily 100% back to normal, I work remotely for the most part. And I think that while it's been helpful to have the flexibility, now I find myself trying to work full time and still like kind of parent full time. My kids do go to school and I have support with my younger son, but I think now the impact is, I think I'm finding a little bit difficult to get everything done because I think the expectations are back at 100%. But there's still that I want to get everything done in the home too, and I'm home all day, so there's no like separation sometimes. So that's my honest feedback on it now.
Well, I will just say, during the previous session panel, I was rudely interrupted by my son who was calling me in. It's about frequent communication throughout the day. One of the dilemmas I had last year when my son turned 11 years old, he kept on asking for a cellular device or smartphone. And, at this age, you look and see how vulnerable kids are at this age, what they could be exposed to, just a phone. But it's a necessity in some aspects because I need to know when he gets home. He's at the age where he can travel to and from school independently. I need to know where he is. I need to know if he's getting started on his homework. I always try to do a wellness check with him to see what went on at school. So even if I weren't here with, I could be, like you said, you could have been anywhere else, but I'm here with you. You're here with me. I would be in the car right now, probably still communicating with him, and then also have an 80-year-old mother that had to keep constant communication with it. Just do daily check-ins or just hourly check-ins at times. So it's tough when you still have you're not fully over the work day as of yet, and you're still taking home the workload coming home. And a lot of people ask, okay, well, you send emails in the wee hours of the morning. Sometimes that's just a reality, and I hate to seem like a person that's just intruding on other people's lives. But sometimes when you need to spend that time at home with family, you want to devote your time during regular operating hours or decent operating hours where people are up, dinner time, everything else. The only time I have is when I can send emails after midnight. I've tried to get better at that. As the pandemic has progressed, but still working on that. It's a work in progress. So
for me, it's difficult, very difficult. And I'm a new parent. The boys are first kids we've had, and my wife is a flight attendant, so her job is it's not Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. I have that. And nobody prepares you for the cost of daycare. I didn't know we can afford a second mortgage. If I knew that, we would have done that a long time ago, because that's pretty much how much it kind of comes up to right now. So because of that, I've had to, I pulled resources. So besides the photography, photography is besides the 9 to 5, and that's still growing. It's not a typical business where you have a product and you get it out there. It's a service, but it's not a service like a plumber. So getting clientele and getting to where you need to be and getting certain jobs that can put you from one to the next without having to struggle. I'm not at that point yet, so I'm working towards getting there. So I had to put aside more of my time to be able to now work at night. So now the family has to take the primary my primary responsibility. And now photography. So I had, thankfully she's not on this looking at this, but I had a photo shoot that I did probably almost a month ago next week that I haven't gotten to edit yet. And that's where it's struggling. And for some reason, I think during the pandemic, like 2020, 2021, I fortunately got a client that was, it's a banking institution. So I was doing work for them. Luckily, when a lot of photographers were struggling, I had that, and did not have to deal with people. It's basically going and taking pictures of unpopular locations to put in their banks. So I was able to do that, and that kind of pushed me through there. But now I'm like on the late end of, now I'm going through that process of not having that much clients. So that's why I had to do what I did there. So it's basically the photography aspect is suffering a little bit. So it's a struggle finding that time, because when you do something like photography, I mean, most entrepreneurs love what they do, right? You're not going to put the effort and time out there if you don't love it, right? And the thing is, that's the struggle. So it's work because it's photography, because you can get clients, you can pick, but you have fun doing it. And that's the thing that's kind of not allowing me to have my personal balance. But I understand that I'll have to sacrifice and figure things out at some point. And it's just about, I'm not afraid to do what I have to do to get things settled, and we'll see where it goes from there. But a lot of things our parents don't teach us about with kids, and multiples, that's a whole different story too.
We take our hats off to you, to all day, because it's at the same time. So it's a little different for some of us on this, for the rest of us on the panel. This is at the same time, so we definitely give it up to you with that. I think I cut off Miss Burnett. I do apologize. Did I cut you off, Miss Burnett? Okay.
Yes, but it's all good. All good. I'm just listening to the parents, and it is quite a struggle to juggle all that we have to. I saw a really great question come in on the chat as well about how we could support our students.
Yes, and I know that Ms. Burnett is being very humble, but she actually was very pivotal in her two nieces, their virtual learning when she was in Trinidad for the last 2 years. So I do think that she could speak to some of that first question, which is on how can as parents support their child without increasing the post levels of stress.
Yes. Well, I think what I did, each parent is different, but what I did was make it as fun as possible. So we would do art projects. We would do, if they're writing projects that they have to do, if it is some reading that's necessary, we would break down the book and then like act it out. It was hilarious, but it did a great deal to lighten the mood. We spend a lot of time doing art projects, a lot of art projects that their ages are between 6 and 11. So between the art projects, we'll have parties, but we'll also make sure homework gets done. What I thought was interesting was that when they got out to school, they didn't so much love going back out to school, but they enjoyed seeing friends and having that interaction, that social interaction that they had. But being back to school felt very stressful for them as well, with the masks and all the protocol necessary. And even having to shift into a school schedule, which is, what they may have become norm, what may be norm for most, but my 6-year-old, she had not known school. She knew virtual school. Virtual school was the first iteration of school that she had. So when she got into what would be regular school, it was a bit difficult. But I think what we could do most really just try to make it as a bit of a project between both of you. I still do this with my son, who's 21 years old. So if he has a project recently, had one which was this to write about the Black Panther Party. He did the research and we discussed it. And we discussed from the place of what's happening now in our community and kind of make it as relevant as possible. And he was able to get quite a high score on it because we really kind of let it sink in by interacting together, talking about it, and make sure that not only did he read it, but that he understood it. I think that's important too. But make it as fun as you can.
Thank you. I want to speak to specifically to not myself or Mr. Daniel, because we have we were in the same boat with our kids were born during the pandemic. And also half Miss Marshall, but she's half in this conversation, right? So Dr. Matthew, Ms. Burnett, Mrs. Smith, this is to you, speaking to the transition of your children were in some kind of daycare school situation before COVID. And then how was that during COVID? And now the transition back into school. How was that?
I would say my son made a pretty decent transition back. I think myself as a parent, I had more anxiety with him going back in person. Of course, I personally didn't feel like the necessary safeguards were there. The school districts, even coming to my own school, the first time when we did an orientation back in August of 2021, I volunteered to come in and work with the incoming sixth graders at my school and noticed that I was in a classroom in a confined space with very little ventilation, even though they put these ventilation boxes or these, air purifiers in the rooms. It was a reality check. Like, are we really ready to come back? Every school district, I guess, throughout the world, throughout this country specifically, had their own mandates as far as putting certain things in place. Even the way students enter the building, even utilizing different stairwells or stairways that they didn't use before, just to practice social distancing. But my son overall, I think he made a pretty good transition. I think one thing that he didn't enjoy was the social distancing aspect. When they got back, they were almost placed in cubicles to divide a group of 4 students with partitions, plexiglass partitions, and even during lunchtime in the cafeteria, they had these same partitions and they had to be silent. Could you imagine a 10-year-old or anyone school age, early childhood, not having that access to their peers, their same age peers, because that's what that age is about, is engaging with your peers, developing socially. A lot of that was cut off. It was already cut off when they were virtual, but it was still like more barriers once they got back in person. And my son was actually reprimanded one time for talking during I think there was an actual assembly. And I said, son, why did you actually, when there's a performance or a presentation going on, you're supposed to be silent. He just broke down and just said, I just miss talking to my friends. So it looks like that was a rough transition coming back. I think it's gotten better. with the restrictions being lifted now, but I think it's still a work in progress for most of our young people. But I think our young people are resilient and they can adjust to any type of barrier that's put in front of them. So they're more resilient than us adults. So yeah.
Yeah, I agree with everything you just said. For me, my daughter, prior to COVID, she was getting taken care of by my grandmother in her home. So, and the transition to being home all the time at first for her was fun. And then slowly she's like, I need to get away from y'all. Like, where's grandma? Where's grandpa? I don't want to be here with y'all all the time. Now going back to schools, I feel like after getting used to us spending so much time together all the time, I feel like her general excitement level about about school, I don't think I don't know. I don't know. It's hard for me to compare, but what I can give you a little more insight on is I have nieces and a younger sister who was in her junior and senior year of high school, because COVID interrupted like two more, but like we were quarantined for like I think it was like two school years or a portion of it. And for my niece, one of my nieces, it was just, I think at the end of like her kindergarten going into first grade. And I think it really disrupted, I think it set her back a lot, right? Because the time when she was learning how, like the basics of like reading and writing and stuff and switching to being virtual, I don't think it served her. She had an older sister who was really self-sufficient and can do it on her own. At the time, my mother was the one helping her. And so not as computer savvy, because my sister's an essential worker. And her husband as well, they both had to still go out. And seeing her transition back into school now, like she's the first full year back in school was it was tough, and we had to provide a lot of extra supports like tutoring, etc. But now she's like thriving, and like it seems like she's like adjusting well. And as for my sister who was 17, 18 around the time, I think her attitude towards going out for like school has changed. Right, they got so used to just being home and comfortable and in the bed and whatever. So I don't know. I'm not saying she's lazy now, but she's in college now and she does what she has to do. But I do feel like it's a little less. She got out of the habit of like going out every day. Yeah, that's my thought when it comes to how they've transitioned back. It's taken, I think, a little while for them to really get back into gear and to catch up.
So that's a good, Ms. Burnett.
Yes.
Your turn.
I answered before, but it's been a difficult transition back. I think it's easy for any of us. We're still working through it as well. I think there are going to show challenges for us all over time. And I'm really interested in what the young before spoke about, how difficult it was for sister back in the groove of going to school. We have to actually give these to people. It's important that we do. We've all been through such a difficult time. And I think that the more we understand that this is difficult for us all, and that we do extend grace throughout the periods that we have to live through this, it's like nothing else. I don't think none of us were prepared for. And even coming out of it, we're still trying to figure out what really works. But from my vantage point as an aunt and as a mother, I think that being able to find a way to be graceful through it, make sure that the young people feel supported, no matter what it is that is going on, that it isn't that they're by themselves trying to go through it, and navigating this, understanding that navigating this is one of the things that we'll ever have to do.
Absolutely. And that takes me to a good point of confidence levels. And this is something that I've seen just as a provider, not so much in my child because he's 2 and he's just 2. But seeing the confidence levels in students and in children, right? So a question came in talking about this and discussing that post-COVID, my child seems to have lost her level of confidence as a student and constantly asks questions instead of trying to reason and figure out things. What strategies can I utilize to assist my child in regaining confidence?
I would say continue verbal praise, but like genuine verbal praise. As parents, our children are very, very intelligent. They know that we are going to be their biggest advocates. They know that at times, I've even heard my son say, "Dad, you're just saying that because you're my dad. You're just giving me praise because, yeah, it's the right thing to say." But being genuine about it, pointing out the highlights and what their strengths are, and making comparisons. Sometimes I know in schools we don't like to make comparisons from one student or one pupil to another, but I always use myself as an example or as a reference. I tell my son all the time. I say, "You are 10 times smarter than I was when when I was in the 6th grade." I had difficulties like in early childhood, as far as inattention, and I had the intelligence, but my son does wonders, or will do wonders around me, or do just circles around me as far as just computation, as far as just reading. Yeah, so I had to point out those things. I even had to break out one of my old report cards to show him the evidence. Like, look, son, this is where I was at, and this is where you are at. You made pretty much straight A's all throughout elementary school. I didn't do that. And it seems like, okay, it's elementary school, right? But I think there's a higher standard years ago. And then I didn't want to expose to him or really let him know that, okay, some of these grades may be skewed because you were virtual the past like year. The bar was not necessarily set high, but you have to point out those highlights, those strengths, whatever it may be, even if they're not doing well academically. They may be doing well at something athletically. Any hobby that they have, you got to emphasize how well they've done, and then it could translate to other domains. But I'll say just being genuine and giving them verbal praise, that's the start. And also, I do want to add, giving them some pointers as well on things on domains they're not really, I guess, proficient at as of yet, but they will respect that over time.
Yes, ma'am.
I wanted to add to what the doctor said, that, yeah, let them overhear you bragging at them, because the confidence levels increases exponentially when that happens. Now, yes, they know you're different, and so you're supposed to say great things. But if you talk to grandma or auntie or someone else on the phone, and they don't expect that they're hearing you, let them overhear you talking about how great they're doing, talking about how much work they're putting in. I've watched work with my young people over time, and I think that it is, even as adults, we want to know that we're making our people proud. So yeah, that's one of the tricks I use. Don't tell nobody.
I'll just add, I think something, because I feel like I experienced the same thing with my daughter. And, um, the fact that she's gotten so used to me being around while she's working, when before she'd get to do things on her own. I notice it even when she's doing homework sometimes on the computer, like iReady or whatever. When I'm not within earshot, she just does it. She does it on her own. And as soon as I come by to like, just even watch, she's like looking up to me for affirmation, like, is this the way to do it? And so I know with her, I tell her, I'm like, you know the answer, you know, I can't, you have to figure it out, like, but you know the answer. So sometimes I guess I find myself trying, as much as I want to like be close and be around and like, you know, see what she's doing, sometimes I try to give her space when she's doing work, to encourage her to figure it out as much as she can. And then if she really can't, she can call me. But I notice if I'm nearby, she's more likely to ask those questions. Is this right? Am I doing it right? And if I wasn't around, she just does it. So.
And I want to bring in our, you know, the earlier people, right? The earlier childhood parents. So that's half of Miss Smith, all of Mr. Daniel, and I guess all of me, right, with my one. And so I would say now there has been such a, I would say almost like a debate on masks versus not wearing masks. As little ones, we have babies, and so they were with us for so long in our own bubble, and then immersing them into the larger settings, right? And now it was mask, being vigilant, now no mask. And now we have a surge of hospitalization cases and a surge of just everything under the sun. How do you feel, like, how are you with that? I know for me, I get very nervous in large settings with him, especially now with his school. They're sending out emails with, you know, however way they can send a message, basically saying, give your child a mask to come to school with. And so that in itself is alarming, because at 2, you're not you know that he has to wear it, but now it's becoming something where they're, as before it was, you don't have to bring the mask in, it's okay, to now they're saying a gentle, almost like a gentle, urgent reminder to say, listen, bring that mask in every day for your child. So how does that feel? What is your perspective on that, with bringing your little ones into these large spaces, with daycare, with indoor playhouses, to and with everything that's going on?
I mean, personally for me, when it comes to the pandemic and, you know, COVID in general, I'm the only person in the household, I would say knock on wood, but I wouldn't even do it, that hasn't contracted it, right? The babies got it first. They do go to daycare. And along with the slew of, you guys know, when they go to daycare, they come home with everything. So the household got it. But, you know, they were resilient, you know, it just passed by them as a traditional flu. The thing is, currently we don't take them to too many places with strangers or people that we're not sure how they respond, you know, or view COVID. So, and we're kind of lucky because they're 20 months now, so they're in this space where they don't even really have play friends, you know, they don't have friends at school where we have to go with their parents and meet up, you know. Makeda, that's, you know, different as family. So we're kind of lucky with that. The school takes their temperature, I've never gone there and seen a teacher or one of the care providers without a mask. Parents still meet at the door. we don't go inside. You still meet at the door. So, you know, the daycare has been doing enough. And, you know, I don't think they need to do anything more. So I'm good with it. You know, my wife has taken them to the mall, but she is on the other side of the spectrum. She's the more careful one when it comes to it. And when I say that, I should not make myself seem like if I didn't. I was really big on hygiene, and I'm very cognizant and conscious of things, of people around me. So if somebody sniffles, somebody sneezes, I pay attention to it. The workspace that I work in, we share and use some of the same devices. So that's things that I, you know, really pay attention to. And when it comes to getting home, you know, wash my hands immediately before I even have to interact with them, even though they, you know, it's already passed through the household. So for me, it isn't frustrating or anything like that. It isn't difficult, but we're really not going to places where we have to worry too much. You know what I mean? We're always kind of away from people. And you know, this summer wasn't bad. We went to the beach, you know, different little experiences to give them. But I know, you know, we don't know where it would be 2 years from now, but 2 years from now, they're definitely going to be wanting to do things and having their own ideas. And that's probably where it's a little bit more difficult, when if they want to do something, you're like, well, we can't do that, but we don't know where it's going to be. Hopefully way further away from where we are today in terms of the rates and stuff like that. But yeah, it's been good. Yeah.
Well, that was actually a perfect segue, because when you talk about 2 years from now, that's where I'm at, right? With my 5-year-old, my 2-year-old. I think it's been really hard because, you know, in the beginning of the pandemic, we did everything we could that was outside when it's warm. Now, and I think summer and spring and even fall is really easy that way. This is the hardest season, where like everything you would want to do with your children is basically indoors. And, you know, unfortunately, I've had to go to the ER twice. My daughter we figured out it was asthma, but before you know it's asthma, you know, because of RSV, I was freaking out. And the reason I brought that up is because both times it was packed like I've never seen it before. And I've been going, my eldest niece is 12, going on 13. And so like anytime we've had to go with her or her sisters or my other nieces and nephews. So I've been in I've gone to this emergency room over the years, and this is the worst I've seen it. So I think existential, in my mind, I am considering it, and I'm like, oh my God, what are we gonna do? And naturally, I kind of hibernate in the winter. So it's like, okay, how do I make my home more fun for the kids, and like, so that they're not missing out. However, we do interact. We have interacted, like we've gone to the Brooklyn Children's Museum, and we've gone to like some of those places. And basically what I try to do is keep their immune system up and wash their hands, well, shower them when they come home. But I think as it's getting colder and the activities have to shift, I'm just trying to be more thoughtful about when we interact or when we go into those communal spaces. Because yeah, year 1, year 2, like we were just inside all the time. We didn't have to worry about it. And my kids are the ones going out every day. My husband and I work remote. So it's a balancing act, because it's like, okay, I don't want to be outside too much, but in reality, they're in school. Well, my daughter's in school every day around a bunch of kids in this building. And so even if I keep her inside all the time, she's still exposed that way. So I don't have an answer. I just know that it's something that I'm constantly weighing in my head. The pros and cons, or, you know, the risks, that I'm trying to take calculated risks and limit them.
I can definitely attest to that. I know for us, it's a little bit more challenging because we can still control some of his whereabouts, except at school, because at school he's everywhere, and they have them doing a lot of different things, from the park to interacting with each other, almost like a Montessori base. So Sometimes it's hard to like control what they're doing at school. So a lot of times when he comes home, he's, not feeling well, or it's always something with the asthma. And so we're just trying to always control that. But like you said, with the winter, we have to be more vigilant with that. Luckily, thankfully, most of his friends are in New York, his cousins, so we can make that little transition down there. And everyone has fall birthdays, so we don't have to worry about the winter birthdays. But we are very, but at least the people that we are around, they try to, be more vigilant about their own hygiene, which I think is so important. A lot of times with some of the play groups that we see out here where I live, they're not so vigilant about it. They're not, you see how they are, they're sneezing in their hands, they still want to talk, they still want to touch you. There's just a lot of things. And so that gives me heart palpitations. And so I then have to, we then have to make excuses to say, oh, we gotta go now. And so, and just go home, because I can't, because the thing about it is that, when he gets sick, the whole house gets sick. My husband gets sick, I get sick. It's like a whole shutdown of the house. And it's hard, and then it just becomes it just becomes a snowball effect. So it's just better to just, sometimes it's okay to just say, you know what, we're okay, and just keep the circle small, which is something that I know that if it was pre-COVID, I probably wouldn't be it wouldn't be like that. We'd probably have a lot more friends with play groups, we'd probably do more things, but it's, I've noticed that my circle and the circle that I want to have him around is a lot smaller, because we're so much more heightened about those things. But I just wanted to pivot into this one question that I think is good for us as parents. The question is, I know that it's important for me to maintain good socio-emotional health, and they're talking about themselves as parents, but I find myself constantly on the go and exhausted at the end of each day. What strategies do you utilize to stay mentally and social and emotionally healthy? This is a very good question. The person is anonymous, so we can't even give them their flowers for this question, but we just want to know what are some strategies you utilize, and what does that look like? I know we talked about it in the beginning, but how do you stay sane?
That's such a good question. It really is. Are you hearing me okay, Dr. Makeda?
Oh,
Yes, Ben.
Yes. Well, I personally have rituals that I do each morning. I spend time with myself first. I wake up extra early, make myself some good coffee, and I enjoy at least a half an hour where I spend time praying, getting myself ready. It is not a simple thing to address this challenge that we're all walking through. So first, I have to make sure that I'm balanced and sound. So I spend time near water wherever possible. I try to ground myself by, ensuring that I'm with plants a lot. I work in agriculture, so I'm always playing with plants. And I talk to them to tell them all the troubles I'm having, and they help me to figure it out. Sometimes it's just when you hear it come out of your own, in your own voice, the solution shows up, as if by magic, but it isn't magic. It just simply is that we have to do things that support our own emotional wellness. And for me, that's waking up early, having time to pray, and to really reset my day the way that I want to have it. Yeah.
Yeah, I will just elaborate, piggyback on what Ms. Burnett had just mentioned. I think you definitely need to find a peer or someone that is that has a similar background or dealing with, similar conditions that you're dealing with. Dr. Green and myself, going through our program, Dr. Green, we kind of overlap, but Dr. Green, I deferred to her in a lot of nights, had to get advice from her on how to deal with matters as far as the dissertation process, how to go about submitting documents, how to be political about the actual dealings with certain professors and instructors. So that was very helpful. We needed each other at times, just as an ear. So I would say if you have someone working in the same field that you're working in, could be a friend that has a certain similar family dynamic as you do. Definitely the peer support is it's really essential to getting through. Even someone at work, people at work are the ones that really understand what you're going through. So I think a workplace peer it can always that you can confide in is always very helpful. And even if they're not able to give you an answer right then and there, just an ear sometimes it's very helpful. And if you could reciprocate that, it's just beneficial. And you don't know, someone can just process what you're expressing and just give you just one little nugget. It may just turn your entire I guess emotional state around. So definitely confide in those that are close to you, those within the same domains that you're working in, similar family dynamics, etc.
That's perfect. Like between you two, you listed off the things that I do. And I think an additional thing I would just add on to for me having I have 3 things that I try to do every morning, which is exercise, pray, meditate, and make the bed. Because that's just my one little thing. At least if I get nothing else done today, I made the bed. And so that's my little thing. And once I can get at least 2 of those 3 things done every day, it helps with my mental space. And like you said, leaning on those relationships and nurturing those relationships, home, work, wherever, is also super sustaining. And so in addition to those 2 really good suggestions, I think the third thing is every now and then taking a moment to reflect and check in with yourself, to see how you're doing, right? Because anything can become either monotonous or stop working and change. And so you have to check in and say, okay, is this still working for me? Or has it become a pressure, that's adding to my stress? And I also try to do that reflection to understand when I feel myself getting close to, when I say the edge, when I feel myself not showing up in the way I like to show up in the world, or vibrating lower, or however you want to say it. There's certain tells that I've started to pay attention to, that if I start doing this, if I start getting short with people, if I start changing the language I use, I'm okay, this is a tell that I'm really tired and I'm not where I need to be. It's almost like a warning sign going off, all right, you have to figure something out, something's not working. And so that would be one of the only additional things I would say to having some kind of consistent routine, especially in the morning, to ground yourself and nurturing your relationships with others. Nurture that relationship with yourself and constantly, as much as you can, or set that time up to check in with yourself and know your tells for when it's getting too much.
So what I like, because I noticed the person said that they're constantly on the go, or they feel like, is that what they said? They feel like they're constantly on the go. It's okay to not do certain things sometimes. uh, like as parents, you want to make sure you cross your T's, you dot your I's. You want to make sure you provide whatever they need. So my example I'll give is today. My wife wanted to go get some things at the grocery store that she needed for them, but it's nasty outside if you're in the Northeast. It's rainy, it's muggy, it's cold. Nobody wants to be outside. And she came outside to the car coincidentally because I left work early, and I looked at her and her shoulders were down, her face was. I was like, why are you looking like that? And she's like, yeah, I have to get whatever. I was like, well, you don't have to. You don't have to. It's okay. Don't do it. You can do it tomorrow. I'm home from work tomorrow. You can do it tomorrow. So sometimes we really feel like we have to, must. And a lot of times the must is not a must. It's just because we just want to get it done. Obviously, if there are certain things you have to get because you need to get it in the house to help them, if it's food, if it's whatever it is. But if it's not a must, but you're making it a must, you can stop. You can do it the next day. The next thing is utilize your human resources. Now, they didn't say, if they live with somebody, if the grandparents are in their life, if they are married, or if they have, if they live with the kids' parent, but the other parent. But utilize your resources to get a break. And if the person that you're with isn't reading and understanding when you need that, communicate with them and let them know. So they can't read your mind. So sometimes if I need a break, sometimes I observe things and I would just sneak away and do what I have to do because there's a lot of people around. But then there are times when you really have to speak and let, your partner or like a grandmother or something know, hey, I'd like to go to the movies. You know what I mean? And that 2 hours, you might fall asleep halfway through the movie, but at least you separated some time to just relax and recenter. So it's an abbreviated version of what Colette was saying. She creates a schedule and some people can't. But I just observed that sometimes for me personally, if all I do is when everybody goes to bed, I'm on my phone, doing my social media stuff, making my reels, figuring out business plans in my head. When everybody goes to bed, if that's 12, 1, 2, I'm a night owl, that's my recharge. That's how I operate. I'm good with that. Now, when they're sick, I don't have that. That's when I get frustrated. But, that's my time when everybody goes to bed, nobody's around, that's my time. And that's the time that I use to, and it's crazy because now having a second job is taking some of that time away, but I have the weekend, so I stay positive. So just look at your hopefully, those two examples could help the individual with the question.
I love that actually from Daniel, ask for help. Sometimes it's so difficult that, we don't give ourselves the grace to ask for help. And I just wanted to leave one more word with everyone who's here. My grandmom says it. She said, don't let your pot shine more than you do. So, we always want to have this spotless house and, make sure that everything is exactly where it should be. But if your pots are shining more than you might want to take a look at why that is. Yeah. And spend a little more time shining you up.
That's a good one, actually, because I actually love that, because that is something that I had to learn as a new mom. It's, asking for help. And I will say that, for my husband and myself, we rely a lot on my mom. Yes, grandmas are the best. Yes, they are, Ms. John. And I would say for her, she has been extremely pivotal, from just, sponsoring her home for the birthday parties to to making sure that we're okay, to traveling to where we are, to make sure that we're okay, or just giving us the grace, or just letting us know that everything is okay, I think has been very pivotal to us just being new parents. And just asking for that help is something that I am still learning, because as a psychologist, people come to you, right? Like, you are the person that people come to. You are the source. And so now having to rely on someone else for your source is something that is a learning curve. But as parents, I feel like we are on a learning curve all the time. It is 6:51, so we're just going to do a check. There are 2 more questions in here about the phone, that phone addiction. Dr. Matthew talked about it before, just a little bit. They are asking for some resources for dealing with that issue. So I will lean on the panel if they have any strategies or resources they can quickly share, or we can get this information emailed to the audience so that they have it. I think this question may be more for Dr. Matthews, since you have an adolescent and you are now experiencing that that headache. I would say that very loosely. And also some strategies on gauging child's mental health status. This is something that's very important. We're seeing with the pandemic, we definitely seen a shift with certain students, just, with social distancing, maybe not fully understanding what was going on, fully gauging why, mom and dad, they may not see them all the time because they're essential workers, or maybe just seeing the difference, right, in the society and what's been happening. So these are some resources that we can also provide to the audience. Are there any more questions that are live stream? Any more questions? So it is 6:52. We will, thank you. Do we have any last minute, not last minute, what am I saying? Last messages for our audience, some more strategies, expertise as parents, as professionals, maybe some more resources on how you stay sane as parents. I loved what you guys said. So any more? I know we talked about exercising, yoga, meditation, prayer, which is the most important one. Staying safe, vigilant, asking for help, support. Are there any more?
With the phones, what I've seen work for the young ones that are now going into their teenagehood, what I've seen work is if you create a rule around it when they come to the house, if there's more than one child available in the house, the phone gets put away. So the phone at the door is, put into a basket and they go do children things. I have watched that work with my nieces, those who have a phone and those who don't have a phone. The ones who don't have a phone tend to do more playing and, cartwheels and all the things that kids that age would do. The ones with a phone, they tend to be a lot more into the phone. But when they get to the household and the phone is put into a basket, they forget about it. So it is, though, to create the opportunity for them to have some social interaction too, because I think that also keeps them occupied. That's why they don't remember the phone, because they have their friend or their cousin to play with. That helps a lot.
I would agree. Definitely setting a specific or a designated screen time or time for screen time in the evening. They say research has indicated that more than 20 minutes, if a child is on a device for exceeding 20 minutes, it will actually impact their vision. And I always scare my son. I do a scare tactic like, son, before you get into post-secondary education, you're going to end up needing glasses. And I said, do you really want glasses at such a young age? So that's, I don't know if that'll work, but I think the younger you get them, as far as having them be responsible with the screen time. And coincidentally, I had to remove my son's phone last week. He took it to school. It was out. The teacher had sent a text message to myself and Maha. And so he no longer has the device. We took the device indefinitely. for school, but we do know that we do need it to track him when he's coming home. But we have managed to get through that, and it seems like, oh, we haven't missed a beat. So definitely, yeah, providing a specific time for screen time that could be 20 minutes or 40 minutes, could be broken up. So I like the concept that some restaurants use now for much older. This could be applicable for more older, I guess, teenagers. They have a basket at a table in a restaurant. Everyone is to place their device in the basket, and the first person that actually uses their device has to pay for the actual dinner. So having a concept like that, where almost like the swear jar technique. Yeah, someone has to put either some monetary amount inside of a jar or something like that when they use their device when they're not supposed to. So it's always, you could be creative with it in a lot of ways. But.
Yeah, and I wanted to say with the younger kids, because they've gotten just as addicted, because we had to get my daughter a tablet for virtual pre-K, and anyway, what we do is, like you guys said, with the limits, I've set them on the device, right? So you don't even have to go. Maybe there's the passive aggressive route, but you don't even have to go through the argument. Like, they know, like, oh no, my screen time's up, and I slowly lessen the amount of screen time that is available to them. I'm trying to get it down to like 20 minutes or something, because that's a whole nother story about this little mini documentary about like how much time they should be on it. So yes, I use the devices to set it so that I don't even have to be the one to remember. And then I think what's helpful is having something else for them to do. I think we grew up in a time when our parents and our elders would just be like, stop watching TV, go find something to do. And we were like, all right, I guess we got to go find something to do. But it doesn't work the same way, right? Like, so I have a craft bin. When they're like, well, what am I going to do? Like, I'm like, you can go make something. Or sometimes on the spot, I'll come up with something they can make. Like, oh, Christmas is coming up. Can you help make me a snowman? Or like, whatever. I think that's also helpful. And like Ms. Burnett said, them having company helps, right? They play, and the type of play they do when they're not on a device is just like the imagination. It's not even comparable. So having something else for them to do and letting the devices do the work for you, I think that helps a lot.
That's actually a really good point. And I like that. So we are actually 6:58, so we are out of time right now, but I do want to thank the panel. This has been a great conversation. I didn't even realize it was time already. But I'm so happy to have you guys on. I'm very grateful and appreciative of the conversation and the advice and the resources that you all have shared. I was made mention that I did not introduce myself in the beginning. So I am Dr. Green. I'm a psychologist serving the Washington, D.C., Maryland, and New Jersey areas. And I am very grateful to be a moderator and to be a part of this discussion with NIHERST and WRAPTT. And with that being said, please, if you have if you would like any more information from the panelists or any more resources from them, we will gladly provide you with their contact information and also their social media handles as well. And with that being said, we are at a close. Thank you so much and have a great evening. And please stay on for the survey that will be provided before the vote of thanks. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Hazel Ann McLean. I am the chair of WRAPTT. And on behalf of WRAPTT, we wish to extend a hearty thank you to NIHERST for this collaboration. I wish to thank President of NIHERST, Mrs. Marlene Lord Lewis, for her leadership and for her warm, welcoming remarks. We wish to also thank the program coordinator from NIHERST, Mrs. Candice Hector, and for the NIHERST team for all of their efforts. I wish to extend a hearty thank you to the moderators and presenters for their time and expertise tonight. I wish to also thank the Education Pillar Lead from WRAPTT, Mrs. Avril Bernard, and the WRAPTT Communications team, Dr. Makeda Green and Chanel Best, for their efforts here tonight as well. And we especially want to thank you, the participants, for being here with us, for being engaged, and for being collaborative. We thank you for your time and input here as well, and we look forward to sharing with you on future events. And on behalf of WRAPTT and NIHERST, we wish to say happy holidays to you, Merry Christmas, and may you continue to be safe. Thank you.